you can minimize my image by using the menu just above my picture, or you can have the image of myself and the PowerPoint side by side. Again, just use the menu. Anyway, without more ado, let's get underway. So welcome to CME's Managing Your Business Online Learning Program. This is new for CME, and it's really in response to what our members have been asking of us, and it's in response to what we've been going through this last 3 months. Today's webinar is the 17 one-hour webinars in the Uncertainty series, Managing Your Business Through Uncertainty Caused by COVID-19. These one-hour webinars are targeting 3 areas: safety, leadership, and operational efficiency. They're on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so tune in on Thursday for my colleague who's going to be sharing with you on communicating with customers. Before we start, I'd just like to recognize our partners, Farm Credit Canada, World Trade Center Winnipeg, and People Corporation. At the end of the webinar, there'll be a very short survey, just 3 questions. It'll only take you about 15 seconds. Really would appreciate you answering those questions, giving us feedback. Anyway, without more ado, let's get underway. The topic today is Lean Fundamentals. My name is Ian Marshall, as I mentioned, Lean Champion with CME. I've been with CME for about 15 years now in the Lean and Productivity Services area. There's a number of things that we do. We work with our members. We conduct assessments. We provide training. We provide coaching and advice. We also facilitate networking, a lot of networking, bringing our members together to share, particularly through our Lean consortiums. We have 4 here in Manitoba, but there's others across the country. So we're a very active Lean community here in Manitoba. And prior to joining CME, I was 10 years in operations, manufacturing operations here in Manitoba, working with a bus manufacturer, ag equipment manufacturer, and also furniture manufacturer. But throughout my manufacturing career, it really Lean, what we call continuous improvement, has really been the sort of the theme. Before coming to the UK with my wife and 2 little boys at the time, I spent 12 years with Lucas Industries. I graduated in the mid-80s. I joined Lucas at a time when we'd just come through a global recession, similar to the global recession in 2008, 2009. Early 80s, we had a global recession. Lucas Industries had been around since the late 1800s. Joseph Lucas, making bicycle lamps, moved on to electrical products for cars and eventually aerospace. So a tier 1 supplier to the large auto and aerospace manufacturers. I joined in the mid-80s when they were struggling. They lost money for the first time in 100 years, needed to change. Fortunately, Lucas was supplying the likes of Toyota and Honda and turned to those customers that were already Lean operations for help. And I learned a lot about Lean during those years with Lucas. A lot of what we were doing in those early years was actually just restructuring from very functional organization into much more customer focused, value stream structured, smaller business unit type structure. You can see a photograph there top right, looks like it's from the 50s or 60s. Totally different today, of course. So an agenda for today, I just want to touch on, what is Lean? For some of you, you're familiar. For others, it's all new. It's a Lean Fundamentals session after all. The history of Lean, just a couple of slides to give you some context as to where Lean came from, the philosophy, which is really important. I think it's really important we understand what Lean really means, and it's much more than you may think. The core principles, drawing on Lean thinking, Jim Womack, Dan Jones' book, Lean Thinking. And just want to finish off the session today talking a little bit about strategy, but I encourage you to tune in next Tuesday on the 16th. I've got another 1-hour webinar where I'll be focused totally on the how-to. How do you implement Lean? How do you execute on Lean? So this is the agenda for today. So let's just start off with why. Why would you want to do Lean? Well, any manufacturing company, any organization for that matter, but particularly manufacturer, there's a lot of stakeholders. But there's 3 groups here I've shown. There's shareholders. There's individuals, organizations that are investing in the company. They're looking for a return. And of course, they're always looking for a better return. But the investors in the organization looking for a return. There are customers, of course, that are looking for product and looking for service. And no matter how good a job you do, the demand is always higher. The customer is always looking for better, faster, cheaper. And we're customers, we're consumers. When we go to the store, we're always looking for a good deal. We're looking for a certain level of quality and service. We're also looking for the best price as well. And we're always looking for availability and things to be done more quickly. We're in a sort of just do it now type culture. So customers are pushing and demanding, and the market is always demanding. But more than all of that, employees, the people that work in the business. I remember listening to Dan Pink at an AME conference a number of years ago. He wrote the book Drive, and he said the three human motivators. Number one is autonomy. As humans, we need to have that sense of control over what we're doing. The secondary is mastery. We need to have the time to be able to master what we do, to be really good at what we do. But the third and probably most important from my perspective is purpose. There has to be purpose to what we're doing. We have to have that sense of we're bringing value to somebody, whether that's internally within an organization or whether that's the external customer. But a sense of I'm here to bring value. That's really important to all of us, I think, as humans, and probably more important, I think, to the younger generation today. So why lean? Why would we want to concern ourselves? Well, because our shareholders demand better return. Customers are demanding better quality. They're expecting it faster, and they're expecting a better price. And employees want to work for companies that are committed to tapping into their talents beyond the job that they've been hired to do. So let's talk about what is lean. What is lean? There's lots of definitions of lean out there. Probably the most common is it's continuous improvement. It's improving the way we do things. I like Jeffrey Liker's definition in his book, The Toyota Way. Lean is a strategy. Lean is a way of running the business. Lean is not just a kit bag of tools. Lean really is about a way of running the operation. But what makes it engaging the people that do the work, the people that deliver the value. So engaging the people, that means everybody in the organization to improve every day, to improve on safety, quality, cost, productivity, everything about the business. So lean is more than tools. Lean is very much about the way we operate as an organization. So changing that, improving that for the better, as I say, to satisfy the shareholder, the customer, and the employees. Lean practitioners focus on process, and David Mann put it very nicely in his book, Creating a Lean Culture. Managers must change from a habitual focus on results, and we tend to focus on results. Did we deliver on time? Was it good quality, and etc. To a different, less obvious focus on process. Lean practitioners, we focus on process. The people doing the work are close to the process. They're able to see whether the process needs improvement. They improve the process, which satisfies the customer, in turn satisfies the shareholders. So lean practitioners, we focus on process. Where can you apply lean? Well, you can apply lean everywhere, right? Of course, in the auto industry, this is where lean came from, the auto industry. Toyota would stand out as a leader on lean. In fact, when people ask me what is lean, I'd say lean is what Toyota does, and I'll come back to that again. Other sectors of manufacturing in Manitoba, we have a whole wide range of sectors of manufacturing: aerospace, transportation, food processing. All sectors of manufacturing can apply lean and have applied lean. New Flyer would be a standout here in Manitoba. But also the public sector. I've spent quite a bit of time in healthcare, and particularly in the US. Lean has been applied in healthcare for a number of years. And so about 10 years ago, I was asked to help out at the St. Boniface Hospital here, and I facilitated a number of projects to help out there. But other sectors of the public sector, Winnipeg Police Service, are also on a lean journey, not such a wide scope, but certainly in certain aspects of their operation, looking to improve the way things get done, engage their frontline staff. And Manitoba Housing is a standout also within the Manitoba provincial government in terms of continuous improvement. Manitoba Family Services doing a lot of great work to serve the clients, to serve the citizens. So where can you apply lean? Of course, you can apply lean everywhere. Wherever there is a customer, wherever there are people delivering a service or a product, you can apply lean. And as I say, that's not just the people that are working, making a product, but it's the people supporting the people that are making the product. A little bit of history. I think it's important to just take a couple of slides on history here. Henry Ford invented lean, let's be clear. When Henry Ford invented mass production, Henry Ford's the father of mass production. He introduced the Model T back in 1908. It was the 20th iteration, Model T. It was designed for manufacture. It was user-friendly. You didn't need a chauffeur. He took manufacturing from the cottage craft industry to mass production. And the keys to mass production, the big key was interchangeability of parts. So having standard parts, using a measuring system, a gauging system with tolerance, interchangeability of parts was the key to his production system. Parts that could be easily attached, and so they could be put together very quickly in an assembly line type situation. So when Henry Ford introduced mass production, he took the average time per fitter or assembler down from 8.5 hours for a highly skilled tradesperson to just 2.5 minutes, to somebody who's relatively unskilled, but doing a very, very repetitive task. So the keys to mass production, huge step change improvement, as you can see there. It's interesting that we think about Ford and we think about the moving assembly line, but actually the continuous flow assembly line wasn't introduced till 1913. That was the icing on the cake. That took the average cycle time per assembler down from 2.5 minutes to about 1.5, so halved again. So talk about waste reduction. Henry Ford was the king there. In the 1920s, 2 million Model Ts per year, huge volumes. If you think about it, even in today's world, that's huge volumes of product. But of course, you could have any color as long as it was black, right? It was the same product. You can apply lean even in the custom business, not just in a high volume, low variety business. The heyday of mass production, of course, the 50s, 7 million vehicles per year produced by Ford, GM, and Chrysler. They pretty well dominated the market in North America. So Henry Ford invented lean, but really Toyota's the organization that we can say has really perfected lean. So a little bit of history on Toyota. The Toyota Motor Company formed in 1937. It was actually Sakichi Toyota that started the family business, but they were into looms back in the late 1800s, sold the rights to the automated loom to the Platt brothers in England, used the money to invest in the motor business, and it was his son Kichiro that sort of led the charge there. So they started manufacturing in very small production, craft type manufacturing cars just before the war, because the war came along. After the war, it was really tough for Toyota. Collapse in sales, labor unrest forced Kichiro to resign. His nephew EJ took over. And the first thing he did, he spent 3 months at the Ford Rouge plant in Detroit. So credit to Ford for allowing the Toyota folk to go there. Kichiro had been out there in the late 20s, but EJ was there in the 1950s, learned a lot, along with a number of other engineers from Toyota. They learned a lot about the Toyota production system, the Ford production system. It's interesting though, even in 1950, Toyota produced very few vehicles. Ford at the time were producing 7,000 vehicles per day at that Rouge plant. But copying Ford was not an option for Toyota. They learned a lot about the Ford production system, but just copying their system and applying it to their market would not work. The Japanese market, much smaller, demand for a much wider variety of vehicles, not just cars, but trucks, small trucks, large trucks, small cars. The labor was protected from layoff, and this was a result of the Americans coming and helping rebuild the economy. Labor was protected from layoff, and there's not a lot of capital. Toyota didn't have money for investing in huge machines. They had to make do with what they had. So the trick was to take that Ford production system but adapt it for their market. And Taiichi Ohno, Shigeru Shingo's others at Toyota at the time, and Taiichi Ohno is credited with developing the Toyota production system, which he did from about 1950 to 1916. Some of the keys were quick changeover presses, so they could run low volume, high variety that was being demanded. Total elimination of what he considered waste. I'll come back to that. But muda, waste, anything that was not bringing in value to the customer. And that stopped the line mentality. Whenever there was a problem, stopping the production line, identifying the issue, trying to get to the root cause, asking why 5 times. These are some of the keys to the Toyota production system, which, as you can see, go back 60, 70 years. All of this captured in the book, The Machine That Changed the World. This was my first book on lean, and it's the book actually that introduced that term lean. Womack and Jones Roos introduced that term lean. Lean, think about it, is lean meat, no fat. In manufacturing, the waste is the fat. We need to get rid of the waste. A little bit of history. Where did lean come from? Ford invented it, Toyota perfected it. And really, I think most organizations are still struggling to emulate Toyota. And the reason being is it's not that easy. It goes way beyond some of the visible tools that you might see. It really goes into the heart of how to run the operation. So let's just talk about that a little bit. What makes Toyota different? So here's Taiichi Ohno on the edge of the, I think that's the machining line there. Some great quotes. I encourage you to sort of Google Taiichi Ohno quotes, but here's one. Why not make the work easier and more interesting so that people don't need to sweat? So, work smarter, not harder. The Toyota style is not to create results by working hard. It's a system, keyword system, that says there's no limit to people's creativity. So tapping into the abilities of the individuals, tapping into their brains as well as their hands. people don't go to Toyota to work. It's an interesting comment. They go there to think. I've often heard it said that the Toyota production system is really the thinking people system. So people going to Toyota to work. In fact, I've also heard it say that Toyota don't make cars, they make people. It's the people that make the product. So huge focus on developing the people that work within the organization. This is the Toyota way. So a pictorial here, and it's interesting, I picked up this diagram a number of years ago, and it's interesting that the Toyota way, the way that Toyota operates, was not actually put down on paper until about 2001. So less than 20 years ago, even though the company's been around for 80, 90 years. But you'll see the two pillars there: continuous improvement, improving the way things get done, driving out the waste, the things that don't bring value to the customer. So improving, but that balanced with respect for the people. In fact, Toyota and other lean organizations, it's disrespectful if you hire somebody and you don't try to tap into their talents, allow them to bring their talents to the fore through problem solving, trying to improve the way things get done. Of course, a strong foundation, a foundation of challenge. We need to improve every day. Kaizen, continuous improvement, respect for the customer, respect for each other, teamwork, working together. No one person can solve the problem. Different people seeing processing problems from different perspectives, different skills required. And that go see mentality. So if you're in a leadership role, don't just believe the data, but actually go see for yourself. If there's an issue, if there's a problem, go see for yourself, get the facts. And in fact, another Taiichi Ohno quote, an expectation if you work at Toyota that you're going to wash your hands a number of times, because if you're a leader, you're going to get your hands dirty. You're going to be there in the Gemba observing what's happening, particularly when things go wrong. So here's another quote from a ex-Toyota guy. David Meyer wrote Toyota Talent with Jeffrey Liker. And it really goes to the heart of what makes Toyota different. Everything we do is for the purpose of showing us where the problems are. We constantly identify problems, find their cause, and solve them in order to improve for the long term. So a few key words there: long term, so long-term vision, long-term purpose, but constantly trying to identify problems, which is a little bit counterintuitive, and it's not the way we normally run operations. We try to sort of avoid problems or bury them or put the Band-Aid on, but the Toyota approach is no, the Toyota production system raises the problems to the surface. When there's a problem, let's deal with it. Let's get to the root cause, make sure it never comes back again. So you see this picture here, looking down on a Toyota assembly line. It's a pretty old picture, I think, but you can sort of get the idea. There's somebody working there. If that assembler needs help, he can just turn behind and then pull that cord that's running the length of the assembly line, and ask for help. So identify a problem, bring help, whether that's the team leader or the supervisor or the engineer. Identify the problem, hopefully identify the cause, fix the problem before you pass the problem on to the next stage. In fact, the assembly line worker there at Toyota is empowered to stop the whole assembly line if necessary. Pull that cord once, the amber light flashes, the help comes running. Within the cycle time, pull the cord twice, and the assembly line will stop, the light goes red. And that's important. Toyota would rather stop to identify and fix the problem than allow it to continue, because it's way cheaper, makes more sense to fix it and identify it than collect it for later on down the line. So it's tough, but that's the way it's done. And there's very few, even to this day, there's very few operations that have that stop the line mentality. But it's important. It's part of the Toyota way. It's part of the Toyota philosophy of running the business. Steven Spear put it nicely this way. He was in town in Winnipeg in 2012, and he said, why is Toyota different? Why are they still 15% more productive? Well, because they're able to improve at a faster rate. And when you're hired at Toyota, you're hired to do whatever you're hired to do as an engineer or an assembler or as a purchaser, designer, but you're also expected to work with your colleagues solving problems, improving the way things get done. So let's talk about the 5 principles of lean. Again, taking from Womack and Jones' book, Lean Thinking. There's 5 principles that they identified in lean organizations. Let's just quickly go through these. The number 1 principle is lean starts with the customer. Who is the customer? What do they value? Probably goes even deeper than this. What business are you in? What value do you bring to your customers? But who is the customer? What do they value? And we think of the external customer. So obviously the person, the organization that's buying the product, but also internal customers as well. So if we're trying to improve the way things get done, we've got to think about who's the customer, what do they value. And it's not always obvious. There's some things are obvious, but there's some things that the customer wouldn't write down. It's implicit that there's an expectation there. So we need to understand that. we need to understand how value is delivered. So the second principle of lean is understanding how the value is currently delivered. What is the current state? And again, don't take it for granted. Often we believe we know how things were done, but until you take the time to observe, maybe do some time study and actually map out the processes, identify each step of the process, you don't really understand how things were really done. This is really a nice cultural change process as well, bringing the people together that work in the process and allowing them to identify the opportunities for improvement. So mapping the value stream, but the goal is to create flow. The third principle of lean, the core really is to create flow. Flow of information, flow of material, flow of service, whatever value you're bringing to the customer, making sure that it flows so it doesn't stop, because any stoppage in the flow is really collecting cost and is a waste. Connecting yourself to the customer through some sort of pull system is also a key part of lean, and that comes later once you've created some stability and standardization, but ultimately connecting yourself to the customer and seeking perfection, never giving up. It's a journey. It's never ending because the customer is always expecting better, faster, cheaper. So let's just quickly go through one at a time again. So lean starts with the customer. What does the customer value? Customer value is all in the eyes of the customer. It's what they're prepared to pay. If you're able to reduce the cost, you're going to increase the perceived value. If the quality and the service stays the same. So what is value? It's whatever the customer is seeking. Understanding the current state, understanding how value is currently delivered. As I say, observing the process, mapping the process. This is the way we do it with brown paper and Post-it notes. So each of those green Post-it notes represents the steps in a process. The yellow represents how long it's taking. We use colored dots to recognize if that step in the process is bringing value to the customer or not. And then wherever there's major issues with those diamonds, doing some root cause analysis, asking 5 whys, trying to get down to the root of the issue. So understanding current state, understanding where there are wastes, mapping the value stream is a really powerful way to do that. Think flow, whether that's information flow, material or service flow. This is our goal, is to flow the product, flow the service. That picture in the middle there, I believe that's from Boeing. And the Boeing aircraft do flow on the assembly line. Or at an airport, flowing passengers, flowing patients through the waiting area of a hospital. So no matter what the business you're in, flow is the key. And the goal is to identify the things, the boulders, the blockages, the constraints that are stopping that flow. Another great quote from Taiichi Ohno on that concept, and all we're looking for is the timeline from the moment the customer gives us an order to the point when we collect cash, order to cash. We're looking to reduce the timeline by reducing the non-value adding wastes. So that's the key, reducing the non-value adding waste. So what are they? So if you look at a typical lead time, you'd be surprised how much of the total lead time from order to cash in the eyes of the customer would be considered waste. If you're in the manufacturing world, the customer is looking for you to have a design of a product, to make that product, I don't know, cut the metal, bend the metal, paint the metal, assemble, test, things that you would all expect would be bringing value. But there's a lot of things that happen in a manufacturing organization that we do that don't necessarily bring value. In fact, when you look at the total lead time, a lot of the time, in fact, the majority of the time is not bringing value. When it comes to information flow, often it's less than 0.1% of time, and even in manufacturing, it can be very, very low. In fact, studies have been done. This is from SNE. More than 95% of the total time is not bringing value. And even when you look at the value-adding steps, there's things there that are bringing value, but they're not necessary. So very little of the time is bringing value. So identifying the wastes is the key. So back to Taiichi Ohno, back in the 1950s, 60s, he was trying to teach his frontline staff what a waste is. What is waste? Because sometimes it can be confusing. Moving materials around is necessary. Of course, it's necessary, but multiple movements of materials, when you're not properly organized, you're having to move things backwards and forwards, that's a waste. Having too much inventory is a waste. In fact, having too much is probably going to create issues of trying to find what you're looking for. So that creates more waste. So inventory is necessary, but also too much can be a waste. Motion, an obvious waste. If you're having to walk around to do the task, I follow people when they're doing their daily task, and it's amazing how much walking around we do. That photograph from Toyota, you could see that the assembler was right by the side of the materials, didn't have to walk anywhere. Everything was right at arm's length, but you'd be surprised how much walking we do. I followed a nurse one time I was at the hospital, and she spent 2 hours walking, not able to bring value to the patients, just walking because of the physical layout of the area. So motion is a big waste. Waiting, sort of obvious if you're in manufacturing, waiting for material, waiting for the forklift, waiting for the machine to be set up, waiting for instructions, just waiting. Overproduction is probably the biggest driver of a lot of the wastes. Not being able to produce at the rate of the customer, overproducing, trying to anticipate customer demand, making what's not required, making in batch. Wherever we're overproducing, we're creating a lot of waste. Overprocessing, again, if we don't have a standard, if we don't have capability in the machines, or the people don't have the right level of training, we're spending more time than is necessary. And overprocessing is a big waste in manufacturing, in the office as well as on the shop floor. And the last obvious seventh waste is defects, not getting it right. Rework probably takes 10 times longer than actually getting it right the first time. So producing defects is a huge waste also. So you see, these are the 7 wastes that Taiichi Ohno came up with back in the 1950s. We've added an 8th waste since then. Skills underutilized. I mentioned that, core to the Toyota way is tapping into the talents of the people. So this was a sort of a given back in Taiichi Ohno's day, but we recognize that underutilization of skills is also a huge waste. As I say, applies in manufacturing, applies in the service sector just as much. So we're trying to create flow by eliminating these wastes, and they do consume a lot of our effort. When I walk through a manufacturing facility, I look around and I look for those that are adding value. In the shop floor, it's really easy. In the office, it's much harder. But whenever I look around, I say, who's adding value at this point in time, and who's engaged in some of these other things here. And you'd be surprised how few people are able to add value at any one time, not because they don't want to, because the system is designed in a way that stops them from doing that. So we're going to identify the wastes and eliminate them. The 4th principle was to connect yourselves to your customers. And this is only possible once, as I say, you've created some stability in your organization. But here's an example. Most restaurants, if you need the help of the server, you have to attract their attention somehow. Often it's quite hard, but how about a bell? Very common in Japanese restaurants to have a bell on the table. If you need help, you just press the bell, and within seconds, the help is there. If you don't need help, it won't be there. So it's a pull system. You ask for help, the customer's in control. And so establish the business so you can react at the pace of the customer demand. That's the ultimate. As is perfection, never giving up, pursuing perfection, continue raising the bar, not being driven by the market, but being driven by your own internal values. So that's a bit of a summary on the Toyota way. There's another way to put it. I was at the Toyota Cambridge plant a number of years ago, and at the end of the tour, we had a chance to meet one of the operations managers. And he put it like this. He said, look, let's not overcomplicate this. At Toyota, we hire average people. The same people that work at Toyota work at your organization. Key is we put them in a standardized work environment. We have to create that standard work environment. So everything is scripted right down to the nth degree of detail. So there's no doubt as to what needs to be done, when it needs to be done. And then we give the employees a challenge, and that is to improve the way things that get done every day. So a couple of points I want to make on this. He said they hire average people, and they do. They're regular people like you and I, but they're very deliberate in their hiring policy. They're hiring for attributes. They're hiring for people that are keen to learn, to grow, to work in teams, to solve problems. There is an expectation that when you're hired by Toyota, you're going to do whatever you were hired to do, but also you're going to work in teams and you're going to improve the way things get done. So they're hiring for attributes way more than they're hiring for experience. And challenge, yeah, this is not random improvement. A big part of the Toyota way is that you're clear what your targets and goals are, and you're measuring how you're doing, you're measuring the process, you're measuring how the process is doing. And the challenge is closing the gaps between where you are and what the target is. So it's a very clear improvement strategy. It's not random Kaizen, it's very, very deliberate. So there is a system that's driving this. So average people, standardized work environment, with a challenge equals performance excellence. That's the formula. If you're looking for the secret sauce, there it is. But standardized work is a key part of this. And so, people would say, well, where do you start? I would say start by looking at the environment and trying to create stability in the work environment. Henry Ford said it way back in the 1920s. I mean, if you don't have a standard way of doing something, it's really hard to improve. In fact, standard work is the foundation for continuous improvement. Ono said the same thing. You'll find that, having, and maybe the standard is just the best of what you know today, just capturing the best of what you know today, and having whoever does the task agree that this is the way we will do it. Then you've got something you can push against and you can improve. So standardization really is the foundation for continuous improvement. If you're interested to learn more about this, you could connect with my colleague, Brett Hiscock. He's a certified TWI instructor, and training within industry goes back to World War II. Actually, it came out of the war effort in the US when there was a huge demand for ammunitions and warplanes and ships and so on, and they had to be produced in a hurry. So they needed a method for producing very quickly using labor that wasn't necessarily used to working in factories. Farm labor, maybe a lot of female workers. And so the TWI methodology evolved. It was taken to Japan after the war, and Toyota picked it up along with a lot of other Japanese companies, and it became the foundation for creating standard work through standard training and so on. So if you're interested, connect with Brett, and it'll help you on that. Because for me, the missing piece of the puzzle in many of our organizations on the lean journey is a lack of standard work. And remember, its core, it's right at the middle there. Average people in a standardized work environment, give them a challenge. So standardized work is key. Just want to wrap up here with some photographs, just a couple of photographs from my trips to Japan. I've had a chance to go to Japan a few times. Why Japan? Not only are there a lot of lean companies like Toyota and Honda and Mitsubishi and so on, but you see lean everywhere. Lean is evident everywhere. Maybe it's just part of the Japanese culture. They're very customer focused. But I remember my first trip to Japan, arriving at Tokyo Narita Airport, and I had to get my camera out. I'm a lean guy. So on the left there, you'll see I'm in the baggage hall waiting for my bag to arrive. And what do you see? You see, first of all, you see some stickers on the ground, right? You see those sticky labels on the ground. And in English and Japanese, I can't read it from here, but it says no carts beyond this point, no carts. So you can see everybody's holding their cart back, and you say, wow, it's a society where everybody follows the rules, and we do need to follow the rules. But honestly, there are more Western folk there than there were Japanese. So, but everybody was following the rules. There was a sign on the floor there, and it said no carts beyond this point. There's another symbol in the middle there. So everybody was standing back, not just the carts, but everybody. And of course, the immediate impact is greater capacity. You see, I don't know, 20, 30% more people around that carousel. Visibility of the bags is much easier, and of course, much safer and much more effective to get the bags. Little touches like the bags have already been oriented so that you can pick up the bag by the handle very, very quickly. So from the airport authority perspective, again, thinking lean, what is lean? Lean is a way of improving the way things get done, but it's for business purpose, right? Trying to satisfy the customer, but ultimately satisfy the shareholder. The more flights, the less infrastructure, the more people that can be put through the airport terminal, the more bags that they can flow, the more revenue for the shareholders. So by increasing the capacity of the baggage carousel, by flowing the passengers through, by flowing the bags through more quickly, you're able to accommodate more bags, more passengers, more airplanes, more revenue, right? So it makes sense. Here's another example, again, of that customer focus. Walking the street of Tokyo, you'll see in Osaka, the other big cities. This is typically outside of a hairdresser, and it's an indication of wait time. So you're walking past the hairdresser, or you're driving past, you want to know if there's a lineup, if there's a queue inside. You just look at the light on the outside. Talk about visual indicators. Green, of course, no wait, zero wait. You can walk in, you're not going to disturb the hairdresser, they'll attend to you straight away. But if it was red, more than 15-minute wait, of course, if you open that door, you're gonna have to wait. You know that ahead of time. Typical scenario here is you open the door to the hairdresser, you don't know if there's a lineup inside, the bell rings, the hairdresser stops what they're doing, they come to serve you, you decide if you're going to stay or not, and then you may stay, you may leave, but whatever, a customer has been interrupted, there's been a lot of waste generated. Here's an example of eliminating waste at its source and serving the customer better. Just totally customer focused, driving out waste, very lean. Here's another example, fast food restaurant style. You'll see there, and maybe this is old hat because we have more of this today here in North America, but you see photographs there above the counter of the meals. You select the meal, you go to the machine, you order, you pay the machine, your number of the order flashes up on the screen. You'll see that in pink on the left-hand side, and when your order's ready, it turns blue, goes to the right-hand side. You go to the counter, you pick up the meal. You didn't interface with anybody. Okay, so it's fast food. You're not paying necessarily for that human interface. You're just paying for value food. And it works. It works. So it's another example of being focused on the customer and delivering value quickly. Lastly, I just want to wrap up here. Something that goes deep and maybe gives the Japanese a little bit of an edge, but it's that sense of self-reliance. All lean organizations lean on the people that do the work. In Japan, sort of trained into people from a young age. Even as you see on the left-hand side there, even in kindergarten, school kids are taught to look after their environment, to clean up after themselves, and even in high school, they're taught to look after the environment and maybe to not just clean up, but also maybe to serve lunch and so on. So no janitors, no staff in the cafeteria. All the students doing this. A sense of self-reliance. We together are in this together. We'll work as a team, and we'll do what needs to be done. So that's another important element of lean. It's that sense of we'll do this together as a team. I just want to wrap up with a lead into my webinar next week. So tune in on Tuesday next week for, I'll get more into the how-to, how do you do lean? And slide here that's a lead in talks about 3 levels of change. I think a change at 3 levels. The Japanese would use the term kaikaku, or big change. When I was at Lucas, I mentioned that spent 12 years reorganizing factories into business units and value streams. Breaking down the functional barriers to create flow and a focus on the customer and accountability. That's big change. And I've done some of that here in Manitoba. Some organizations, they have many value streams. And so providing focus, ownership, and accountability is key. So big change is a part of lean. Often requires a project team, maybe a number of months in order to execute on that. Kaizen Blitz, very powerful strategy for driving out waste in a relatively short time in a very focused way. Works really well with cross-functional problems, cross-functional team together for, typically we have Kaizen Blitz for 3 days, but it could be 5 days. The Toyota way is 5 days, but hitting a cross-functional problem, observing, time studying, mapping, identifying constraints, getting to root cause, coming up with solutions, and actually trying out those ideas all in 3 days. A very, very powerful approach, methodology for driving improvement. And then there's daily Kaizen. We think of continuous improvement. We think of daily improvement. Paul Akers did a great job in his book, 2-Second Lean. I've heard Paul speak a number of times, very entertaining, very passionate. He calls himself the lean maniac. If everybody were improving the way they do things and just shaving a couple of seconds every day, that would bring huge improvements. Of course, it requires investment from the organization, right? So what is the leader's role here? The leader's role is obviously to create the environment and the encouragement and the time, the resources to allow staff to get involved in continuous improvement. At FastCap, and he's the lean maniac, I mean, he'll allow 45 minutes per day for his staff to do this. Most organizations, it's much less. Even at Toyota, we're talking about maybe an hour a month. It's not as huge an investment. But if you're early in the journey, and it's important to engage all the staff, having the staff sort of do just simple little things that are going to improve the way things get done in their particular workspace, that's a good thing. Anyway, we'll come back to this next week on Tuesday. We'll talk more about cross-functional Kaizen Blitz and also daily improvement. So I'm going to wrap up there, I think, because I'm sure you've got some questions for me. There's lots of books that have been written, many books. This is just a selection of books that you might want to access. Some books on the right-hand side are particularly for leaders, but there's a good long list of resources out there as well as videos. So I think now is the time to have a look and see if you've got any questions for me. So I'm going to take a look at the top there, see if you were putting any questions in. So I got a couple of questions here. It's often asked, what's the benefit? Why would I do lean? And as mentioned, we're doing lean for business benefit. We're not doing lean for sake of lean. We're doing it because we want to better serve the customer. But by investing in employees grow, employees feel better, employees are more loyal, and the customer gets better served, and in turn the shareholder gets better served. But daily improvements in productivity of 10 to 15%, very, very common from just daily improvement. And when you do cross-functional Kaizen and big change, we're looking at step change improvements, as much as 75 and 80% improvements in terms of reduction in lead time or reduction in inventory, improvement in quality, and so on. So improvements are huge. Where do you start? Where do you start if you're just starting out on the lean journey? I would say start with a little bit of education, um, but start small. Maybe start by focusing on the work environment and trying to improve the work environment, tidy up the work environment, apply the methodologies to improve that. That's a good place to start. Maybe start in an area where there's already some interest from the employees that work there. So start small, learn, do something, and grow on the success. A question that came up this morning was, what is the leader's role? And the leader has a really important role on this lean journey. I'm going to wrap up just a couple more questions here, but what is the leader's role? The leader's role is to provide that sense of direction. Why are we here? What are we doing? What is the value that we're delivering to the customer? So provide that sense of direction, but also provide the business case, because it's going to require investment in time and energy and money. So the leader's role also is to provide a business case and continue to fight that business case. Once you start to see results, it's a little bit easier, but maybe tackling the naysayers as well. So create an environment where everybody can get involved, so people can be trained and people can take part in problem solving, so everybody can participate in this journey. It's going to take time, but that's a big part of the leader's role. It's going to take a number of years, but you should be able to see benefits pretty early on, and of course hold everybody accountable. So the leader has a really key role, and we'll come back to that next week. Interesting question came up this morning about, we've been on the journey for a while and we've fallen off the journey. Now we want to get back into it. How do we restart? How do you restart a lean journey after things have faltered? And that's often the case, right? Ideally lean is the way you do things, but often it's just tacked onto your day-to-day, and it takes time before it becomes mainstream. I would say in order to reinvigorate your lean journey, you have to start to show results. So you got to choose a part of the business that needs help, and tackle that problem with a cross-functional team, or just identify the wastes and make the necessary improvements and start to show some results. I think results will start to get the attention, and we'll start to get things back on the rails again. But we've got to remember that this is as much a cultural journey as anything else. So, change management, communicating the why, making sure everybody is aware of why we're doing things and we're improving, to better the customer's experience, but also to better the work environment. Change management is a big part of this. So restarting is hard, but it's not impossible. Most organizations go through waves of change. I think that's about it. I got no more questions here, so I'm going to let you go. I don't see any more. No, so no more questions. So I'm going to let you all go, but I look forward to seeing you all next week. We've got a survey coming up. Let me just move my slides now if I can. No, it's got to get rid of that. Okay, here we go. So thank you very much for attending. I just want to thank our sponsors again. Farm Credit Canada, World Trade Center Winnipeg, and of course People Corporation. We have a quick survey that we would like you to answer. It's like 15 seconds, 3 questions. Just go ahead, answer that, and then we're all done for today. Thank you very much. Stay safe.